9:30, so if everyone could find a seat, we'll get started here. Well, thank you all for coming to this morning's ULI Governor's Advisory Panel on ensuring a fiscally sustainable future, increasing opportunities for quality infill and urban redevelopment. My name's Hunter G., and I'm the chairman of the local Urban Land Institute District Council. As always, welcome and thank you to all of our members and to our annual sponsors. As always, a big thanks. I personally would like to also welcome anyone here today that is new to ULI, and especially welcome those who may have traveled in from some of our surrounding counties and even states. I saw there were some out-of-state guests. While the panel was asked to address the challenges as they relate to Davidson County, this issue is not unique to Nashville. In fact, we believe the panel's findings and recommendations will be applicable to other Middle Tennessee communities and hopefully other communities around the country. ULI governors have been described as industry leaders who have been involved with ULI for a long time and who feel passionately about the organization and about the impact of land use and real estate in our communities. They have a tremendous knowledge base in their areas of expertise and are considered by many to represent, as a body, the apex of industry experience. A ULI gap is a product of the generous funding of the ULI Foundation, specifically of longtime ULI trustee and foundation governor John Hagestad. When Mr. Hagestad decided to underwrite a special series of ULI advisory service panels composed of fellow governors, his thoughts went to communities seeking objective, unbiased perspectives on best land use practices. For Hagestad, the governor's panels represent an opportunity to gather an exclusive group of deeply committed ULI members at the height of their careers to help solve pressing problems. We're so fortunate to be the recipient of this generous support of ULI and the Foundation and of the ULI governors who've come to our town for the past few days. Now, the issue that we've asked the panel to address. Recent presentations and studies here in Nashville have underscored the relationship of land use to fiscal sustainability. First, a Smart Growth America study illustrated how urban infill and redevelopment generates exponentially higher net tax revenue and, in fact, subsidizes infrastructure costs and public services to our low-intensity suburban areas. And as Raleigh-Durham's Mitchell Silver so eloquently pointed out in his Nashville Next lecture earlier this year, every time we're asked to approve a new low-density remote subdivision, we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to either reduce the level of public service we're providing to the community or raise taxes? On behalf of ULI Nashville and the Middle Tennessee region, I'd like to thank the Urban Land Institute, the ULI Foundation, and our visiting team of ULI governors and the elite ULI staff who are managing the gap, Gail Behrens and Jess Zimbabwe. Thank you. A big thank you to the ULI Nashville members who served on our committee that met nearly every other week for the last 5 months to prepare for the gap. Would any of our committee members please stand up that were involved in the preparation for the gap? Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. I'd also like to thank all the local folks who participated in information gathering interviews over the last few months and while the panel has been here this week, as well as those of you who've completed our recent online survey, which was shared with the panelists. Finally, I'd like to thank the local GAP sponsor team, who's the recipient of the GAP findings. The Metro Nashville Davidson County Office of the Mayor, including Mayor Carl Dean and Deputy Mayor Greg Hinote, Finance Director Rich Riebling, Metro Planning Executive Director Rick Bernhardt, who, by the way, the Planning Department was extraordinarily helpful in pulling together the briefing package for the panel, and our Director of Economic Development, who I'm now going to turn the program over to, Mr. Matt Wilshire. Matt.
Thank you, Hunter. And on behalf of the mayor's office, we want to say thank you even before we've heard the results. So they better be good.
Now's the time to do that.
That's right. Well, we'll say thank you now to ULI for this initiative. As Hunter mentioned, I think a lot of us in the community intuitively believe that sprawl and spread out development place a higher burden on service delivery from Metro, whether it's needs for further pipelines of water, stringing electric wires further, having roads, transportation for kids to school, that there are a variety of services that if the population is more spread out and less dense, place a higher burden on delivery of Metro services. And given the fact that we want to continue to maintain a low property tax, low tax environment in Davidson County, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to deliver a high quality of life with safe streets and improving schools, it is critical for us to look at how we develop as a community going forward. And you've seen Mayor Dean push a number of initiatives along this line, in particular the AMP, which I'm sure we'll hear some about, but the importance of mass transit in further developing more dense environments. In addition, we believe that there are demographic trends that are driving this from a market standpoint. When you look at the millennials and baby boomers looking for different housing choices, we believe that there are demographic trends that should be supporting this. And obviously, Nashville is a more laissez-faire community. So we're excited to hear some academic and sort of specific analysis of whether or not our suppositions are correct, and then also, most importantly, some ideas about how we work going forward to be able to encourage the market to develop in the most efficient manner possible for our community. And when you think about real estate development issues, frequently you think of neighborhood groups in conflict with developers, in conflict with the planning department. And I think this is an opportunity where the interests of these different groups can be aligned, where you have developers wanting to build product that aligns with the demographic trends, where you have planners who see the importance of what a community looks like going forward, and where you can have neighborhood groups maintain the quality of existing neighborhoods, but also support the growth of those neighborhoods going forward. And so we are hopeful that this effort can yield a stronger community, better cooperation amongst different parts of the community, and some new ideas about how Nashville can continue to lead the market in terms of supporting development and smart growth. We are big fans of ULI. Mayor Dean was a Rose Fellow working with Jess and the members of ULI a couple of years ago. And the ULI chapter here, much to Hunter's credit, has been one of the fastest growing ULI chapters in the country. And so we are excited to continue our partnership with ULI and appreciative of all the work that Rose does in helping to guide and lead that effort. It is now my honor to turn it over to the people who you actually want to hear from, the GAP fellows, and in particular to introduce Dick Reynolds, who is the chair. Dick has a long career in real estate and is really perfectly situated to lead this initiative. He has worked in the real estate development world for a number of years for different firms, including Hines. He has worked in academic institutions at Tufts, of which he is an alum, and he also received his MBA from Babson, I believe. And Dick has also worked as a consultant and currently is leading his own consulting firm. So he brings expertise from an academic standpoint, from an operational standpoint within an academic institution. He was most recently the vice president of operations at Tufts, but also from real-world practical experience as a real estate developer himself and as a consultant to other real estate firms. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Dick Reynolds and the team. Thank you so much.
All that experience just means I got old. Your suppositions are correct, and I can speak from personal knowledge because I am within 7 days of being the oldest baby boomer. So I'm in that category, and my sons are millennials or Gen Ys, so we're seeing that as well. But the suppositions that Hunter and Matt just described, I think we agree with, and that's going to guide, to a great extent, what we're going to be talking about here today. We also understand and agree with the concern about urban infill and redevelopment being more expensive, and particularly on a net revenue basis, than suburban development. But I think we're going to come at it a little differently. The answer to that is not to reduce the cost of urban development. That's very hard to do. You can fiddle with it at the margins. The way you do it is make it more attractive. And we're seeing that in city after city, where the demographics are going in the right direction. Empty nesters who want to come back into turnkey condo living, millennials, Gen Y, whatever you want to call them, who also still want to have the city, the amenities that go with that. You do it by making it more attractive. And we're going to talk about some of the things you can do there. One of the jokes that's been around ULI for years is that if we did a survey of the American populace, the only answer would be the only thing worse than sprawl is density. And that's the reality of dealing with our population. And you'll hear at the end of our discussion, and I want to just give you a few heads up on this, the need to communicate with your population, with your elected officials, about what needs to be done, what the benefits are, and examples of how things work. So quickly, let me introduce the other panelists so you'll understand the context within which they're going to be giving their discussions. To my immediate left, Rick Rosan. Rick is a trained architect, but in recent years has been the CEO of the International Urban Land Institute. So he's been to damn near every city in the world to see what works, what doesn't work, has talked to and worked with all the great architects and developers over the last few years. He finished up as president of the ULI Foundation, which is the governors who support this GAP panel, and is currently a senior advisor to the foundation. To his left, Mary Borgia. Mary has her own firm that does strategic marketing advisory services. So she spends her life working with developers and investors and talking about how do you sell in the best sense. How do you market your project? How do you position it? How do you take advantage of market demand? How do you take advantage of local issues as well? And to her left, Howe. Con is currently the head of CityView, which is a for-profit housing investment fund started by Henry Cisneros. So they're doing some great things in California, but you should also know that he was for a number of years the city planner for the city of Los Angeles and the planning director of the city of New York. So I think he's got a pretty good handle on how to deal with urban issues when you talk about having worked in those two cities. So let me begin by saying that to a person, this panel is impressed with what you're doing in Nashville. Both from a public sector and from a private sector, you're doing most of the things right already. One of the comments that I heard when we first got here was, well, we're hoping that you folks might be able to show us some low-hanging fruit. Folks, I'm halfway up the tree looking for fruit. You've got the low-hanging fruit. There's nothing on the ground. You're doing the right stuff. We're going to talk about a few things that we think you ought to emphasize, but keep at what you're doing, first of all. You've got a strong base here, great diversity of employment, strong public amenities. Frankly, one of the things that, just speaking for myself, that I like is that you've had the good sense to put many of the newer public amenities downtown, which is what you want to do and not spread things around. That's absolutely the right thing to do. You've got the major infrastructure support of the interstates and the airport, all critical in terms of future growth. So great base, good diversity, you're doing the right stuff. I think what we're most impressed with is that even though you are already doing so many things right, you're still interested in hearing about ideas about how to do it differently or how to keep doing things for the future. And we applaud that, and we're delighted to be here and offer some of our thoughts on how to do that. What I've seen certainly over my 40-plus years in the industry is that success is unfortunately often its own worst enemy. Cities are successful, they get complacent, they take their success for granted, and that's when things start to go downhill. Also, and this is going to be a little bit counterintuitive, being too successful leads a city, I'll use cities, but the private sector and the industry in a given area, to get a little greedy and to want to take advantage of a current market wave and really ride it as hard as they can. You get too far out in front of the wave and you start to create your own boom and bust cycle. So from my standpoint at least, measured growth with an eye towards being able to adapt to the changes in the market and demographics are really critical to being continued successful. One thing, Hunter and Matt referred to the Rose Center study that was done here in February of 2010, 3.5 years ago. We're nothing if not consistent. Read this report again. What we're going to be saying in the next 25 minutes or so mirrors what was said 3.5 years ago. Some of it you've done, some of it you need to still do. But read that report. You'll get our report in a number of weeks as well. But we're fairly consistent. One quote that I just want to read from that, and there's a number of them. This is just one to be an example. Likewise, a disconnect seems to exist between the land use regulations and public investment in streetscapes and transportation infrastructure. You're going to hear us talk about that specifically 3.5 years later. So, good stuff, doing the right thing, keep it up. You know what to do, you already know what to do, and we'll help with some other ideas. So, I'm going to turn it now over to Rick, talk a little about the urban design concept.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here. This is about the third or fourth time I've been in Nashville. Rose had me on your Awards for Excellence jury, actually one day with Hunter, probably 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and I remember I'd never been to Nashville. I was blown away with the most, so many interesting things you were doing. Particularly at that time, I was amazed at the green development that was going on here, which has now continued in an explosive way. So this has been a great day, a couple of days for me to recap all the kinds of things that I had seen before, and then think about the future the way you guys are thinking about it. I want to reiterate Dick's position. Is the first thing we said to ourselves was, well, why are we here? This is an awfully successful place. Most cities don't have the advantages that you have. The one that he didn't mention that I think is amazing, that you know, is the fact that your county and city are one, and you have one entity that manages the entire place, which makes life a lot different from even a place like Boston, which is a very small city in a very large metro area, and you have different tax bases and schools in this. Here you have one central place that can run it, and you can actually plan it and make it better. So what we looked at, and again, applauding the work that was done, we were very impressed with your planning director, Rick, and talking about what they're doing, not knowing where they're coming out with their Nashville Next is, sort of a plus and a minus for us, because you're going there, but we're not sure where you're coming out. So we had to make some guesses. But the main thing that we came out with on terms of a big planning vision was that we think you need to have a big planning, urban plan vision for the city that needs to be out there publicly, understanding that the world is changing on you. This room looks very much like rooms like this all around the country. The demographics look pretty much the same as they are, a little bit older, very, very white, very, very male. This is not going to be the same room 10 years from now. You're going to have a very, very different group of people in this room, and the very, very different demands are going to be on them. And I think you're right on. They want to be in urban areas. They want to live in maybe smaller spaces, maybe have to live in smaller spaces, and a lot of the things you're doing will really help that. But we think that the one thing that doesn't seem to be consistent is that there isn't any marriage between this big plan and your transportation plan. This is the only city of this scale and this success that I've seen in the country that isn't way out there on mass transit. You know, I know you're going to do this BRT, but it's only one line, and as far as we could see, there was not a comprehensive plan for mass transit that is linking all the different areas in the county together. And even though it maybe wouldn't be implemented for 5 or 10 or even 20 years, there doesn't seem to be a plan that says that. And if you're going to rely on the car for everything, then you're going to be consistently killing yourself trying to build more and more parking garages. And we heard that. We heard parking and parking over and over. In every interview we had with you was parking is a big issue, costs a lot of money, and so forth and so on. If you don't have mass transit, you can't drive people to not using their cars. I mean, it's kind of intuitive that you have to do that. So what we think you need to do is create a mass transit plan, whether it's all BRT or it's a combination system with smaller bus lines and maybe some fixed rail long term. We aren't we aren't here to make that decision in 2 days. But I think you need to look at that and look at the whole region, and that will help you densify, make the city work better. We were very impressed with some of the unique things you did. None of us had ever seen duplex lots before, and we were shown some of these duplex houses. I think it's a very imaginative program, and it's quite amazing that you can go into a community and basically double the density and have people build these very attractive new homes in infill places in the city. So you've already come a long way on this infill, and are doing some quite unique and imaginative things. We want to congratulate you on that. But again, what we saw was a lot of very attractive individual projects, which you and your planning people have negotiated, individual projects. And when you go from the project outside to the main road, the connective tissue is not the best. It doesn't look, it looks like America all over the place with these strip streets with miserable malls on either side of them. That some are good, some of them are dead. You know, there isn't. It's all car-oriented, and I think somehow the connective tissue between the different nodal areas in the city need to be connected in a way that is attractive and efficient. You can design those roads much better than they are, and I think you have the means, the financial means, to do that over time. We were struck by the fact that you haven't done a whole lot of municipal streetscape improvements. Most cities are doing things with their streets, their sidewalks, their lighting, street trees, and so forth. And even in the downtown, I think that could be enhanced more than it has been. It's an area that goes forward. To attract this new population that is coming, whether you like it or not, they're going to be younger. There's going to be a lot of them. The Gen Yers, there are more Gen Yers than there are baby boomers. Baby boomers we're all basically a thing of the past. We're just going to go into some retirement operation somewhere. And these baby boomers are coming, and they want to live in a vibrant place that's attractive and fun, and they will come to it. We've seen the surveys. They don't go to places because there's a company they want to work for. This is something that's past. General Electric used to attract people to Schenectady because they were going to work for General Electric. You don't go to Schenectady because you want to work for General Electric. But you'd only go there if you wanted to go there. I'm not sure anybody does, but you'd go there because you want to go there. People want to come to Nashville because they want to come here. Maybe it's the music or the ambiance, some of the good things you had, but that you have to keep building better over time. So over the next 10 years, you've got to make this place feel and be more attractive, more bike lanes, more walking paths, more connections that make infill and downtown and dense environments more appealing to people. And again, no criticism, you're doing most all of these things in some way right now, but maybe with a big plan that really announces it to the world that you're doing this and this is where you're going to go, it would help. Because I would just finish that there is a great statement by probably one of the great planners of the last century, Daniel Burnham, whose Chicago plan is still really the master plan of the city over 100 years later. And he always said, make no little plans, as they have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. So that's where I would leave you. Make a big plan and make everybody know what it's like. Thanks. Now, Mary's going to come and talk more specifically about the ideas of nodal and neighborhood development and the connecting tissue that we think you need to work on.
Well, good morning, and I am delighted to be here and part of the panel and to be able to visit your city and give you some opinions and help, I hope. I think that there's something that struck me very much when coming from the West Coast, although I've worked nationally, but that the Nashville, your metro area is 520 square miles. That area is really larger than LA or New York City. So what you have, the opportunity to have, what you're doing is really impressive. I think the other thing that I found impressive is that you do have a metro government. In so many places that we work, and that's what people want, because you have the 35 council districts, you have your at-large representatives, you have the ability to really address a great area in an efficient, positive manner, and I think that's a tremendous asset. I think the other thing that I noticed is that Nashville has enviable press. It's no wonder that you're attracting the creative cultural types that you are, that you're having the growth that you are. But to that point, I just want to address that demographics change. And so as you're looking at these lines of people today, 5 years from now, they're going to look different. 5 years from now, they're going to look different again, and so on and so forth. So it's really important in this thinking that you have a flexible plan that allows you to address market demands. That's where I'm going to kind of come from. Because even when I will kind of talk to one of my colleagues' comments, baby boomers aren't dead. It's a long process from 60 to 80, 90, or whatever that number is going to be at some point. That's a lot of life changes. So, and even if we think about our millennials and stuff, and when households may choose or not choose to have families, and how they're going to choose to live, that crystal ball kind of, we have to be flexible with it. And I think that's what you're trying to do in your plan, and I commend you for that. So I kind of want to talk about planning for success. I think that the other thing that I was impressed with was what you've done. This downtown area, some of the architecture, the new facilities you put in are really fabulous. So well done. But what I see sometimes, and this applies to a master plan community, a neighborhood community, is we all have limited resources. And how do we use those resources the best way we can? The city has a tremendous staff. There's a wonderful community of builders. I've noticed community input, but it's still, it's a finite number, and you have a tremendous area and a tremendous, from the plans that we've seen in all these neighborhood plans, it's like my comment and thought is to concentrate, to get the greatest impact, concentrate those resources, and to keep yourself in a flexible position. I sort of looked at this and I was thinking, working with my colleagues, that I was sort of looking at things like inside 440 and outside 440. And it just seemed like you've got the urban core, downtown Nashville, and there's some great things going on there, and to really continue focusing your higher densities there. And I'll address that a little bit more. There's a variety of opportunities that can meet a wide range of consumer needs, commercial needs, residential needs, but to focus there. And then I'm making the line of 440, saying outside 440, I want to talk about neighborhood nodes and how you can create place and create concentrations that will help be a center for development to come from. And the reason is that you have a history of, you have a city plan that has these spokes and corridors, but that can easily turn into a sprawl kind of condition in sort of like having in the placemaking world. So if you can create these nodes and be working to and from the nodes, it might help the process and also help flexibility and such. Because what happens, I think, that the other comment on this is that you wanted to, the question was, well, how do we address the booms, the busts, and the waves? Not getting ahead of oneself is part of how one does that. Phasing is how one does that. So scaling, so you're working within what current demands are and not overbuilding, but the ability to expand to meet demands as the market's there, just not getting ahead of it. So with that, I think I want to make some comments about what I observed inside 440. You have some really wonderful development and some lessons to keep applying and expanding upon. I think what I was impressed upon in the Gulch is it does represent a master plan. You have a single owner, but it's addressed what's important. You have a mix of uses that can address a mix of users. So you've got office, retail, entertainment, commercial, and residential. And within that residential, there's room to provide a variety of for sale and for rent housing, and with the different products to address what the demand is. You might start at a middle point, but you might go up and make larger units because you're finding that your move down buyers, you're moving to the city older buyers, just want more room. And you might find that because the student population from Vanderbilt is coming into the city, or whatever entity is drawing younger, you might need more of that studio product. But that master plan allows you to address a range of consumers, which I think is positive. I think the bid district that was done there is another good example because it provides a mechanism to maintain those streetscapes and and I'm not sure about this one, but often it's also the event and community activities come from a bid program. But it helps to create community in place and sustain it through the life. I want to comment about One City and the bid I know about it. And the reason is because it's innovative, collaborative environment that it brings together. I think those are trends that are enormous to think about. It's bringing together healthcare, life sciences, technology. It's a forward thinking. It calls itself mindful. It is very, very, very current, very important. And it's set in an area, again, where it's close to the university, close to the existing hospital, and it can bring those together. It's a great platform for more residential. All those uses have various residential needs, whether it's the workforce, I'll use the term workforce housing in this context, for the hospital and the healthcare system or other employees of this group, but also to bring in some more luxury housing if needed, and that can happen downtown as well. I think what I'm wanting to stress is there are a variety of consumer segments to be serving. So, and then my last little example is Germantown. We loved Germantown. I think in just this sample, what I want to show you is you've got the intense mixed-use urban environment of the Gulch. You have this new technology center, forward-thinking center of what One City's trying to do, and you've got a great example in your own backyard of how to deal with an existing redevelopment area. I think the work that was done in context, the little courtyard, I couldn't get all the photographs I wanted, so I may even not have the right photograph up there. But essentially, the way the streetscape was handled in terms of little courtyard homes and the row houses, that texture, and then you did have some 3-4 story multifamily, that texture, that's what you need. It's not one size fit all. You don't want a homogeneous, I don't believe, you want a homogeneous community because you're not a homogeneous, it's a variety, and variety is what really makes it interesting and vital, and that's where the value comes from. I was laughing with one of my colleagues. I'm one of those people when I'm in that value engineering conversation, I bristle, and it's like value adding. So it's like, how do you value add? And I think you're greatly value adding to your urban core by having this menu of choices. And I've told the guys, when I look at the mall and that land, I'm thinking, this may sound silly, but I really think like Millennium Park. When you have a wonderful, enormous green space like that, it's a great magnet for development and for growth. And my other piece in that is the walkable. I just want to address the walkable and the smaller pocket parks, because walkability is not just walking to the bus, but it's walking through your neighborhood and having places to go to, and not just the retail places of the library or the school. So my last section and topic is sort of outside 440, and that you continue to think creatively. I'll jump to Lenox Village for a minute. It's a traditional use community at the south end that we've got to visit. Well done. A nice variety, a nice intimate feel. I'm going to guess the neighbors living there, I'm going to guess there's a really strong community because it just felt right. And then I want to address Green Hills just a little bit. And the reason is the Hills Center. I think in terms of what opportunities are, this represents another what's opportunity that exists. This wonderful street was put in, a retail street, and it's terrific, but it's like, where's the residential? So as you look at these infill pieces and such, or these kind of infill, even in great neighborhoods, there's opportunities to redevelopment, but it's one might take a lower use pad, or maybe you do an overlay. I'm not going to speak to as how these gentlemen might in terms of how you'd zone it or how you approach it, Rick. But you can look at something like this and even look at some of these pads. Parking lots are sort of like just interim uses. If you do have them, it's an interim use. That could become residential. You can mix this. There might be parks and residential that happen between this and the mall going to the east or north, whatever that is, outward. or even above the parking structures. But thinking about how things can occur, I'm not much of a tower person sometimes, and I think that in the context of form, or however you as the development community do it, but having variety in form, stepping back, adding in green spaces is really critical to adding value and making these spaces livable, healthy, all those things you want to have, and vibrant. So I think I've covered the points that I wanted to address with you. I think, so to kind of recap on the node, the reason I was struck by the challenge and opportunities that you have is when I look at the corridors, finding those places that you can generate from when you're outside the 440 belt. Because in theory, really, if you're coming down long corridors, it can be a kind of form of sprawl again. But if you come from an intersection, let's say this is a very defined node, but there might be a retail street, there might be a school, there might be a library, there might be something of character that you can build from and add to. And that might be, as you'll hear my colleagues talk about street scene and amenity, that's the starting point for you as the whole governing body, however you do your public-private partnerships, however you work as a city public works, however you do it. But making a difference, making a visible change, and then working from it, because the success of that will bring more success, more investment, and more of what you're already doing well. So with that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Ron.
Well, of course, we wanted to show you a photo to remind you there's still lots of work to be done. The panel, I wanted to share a few observations of the panel, which were informed by both our tour and the materials that the committee gave us ahead of time, the interviews, and part of what the committee's work was a survey, and we actually read that thoroughly, and I'll quote part of the survey at the end of my brief remarks. While everyone has said we were impressed with the current quality of the infill development that's going on and what we presume and understand to be the city's plans and its zoning, frankly, we were unimpressed with the quality of the right-of-way, the public realm, even, maybe most importantly, even in the areas where there has been new development. Every city, all of our cities have miles and miles of streets like this, and we know in the next 3 to 5 years you're not going to be able to wave a magic wand and improve all of those corridors. But it does seem that where infill development is already occurring, you can make significant changes and improvements in the public realm and in the streets. And the reason that's important is the committee asked us to look at the additional costs of building urban infill. And while no one in this room can affect land costs, there are things that can be done that can lessen the costs of traffic congestion and parking. And so we also wanted to focus on something that really is a public responsibility. And I would emphasize that it is the city's responsibility to provide a right-of-way that is sufficient in capacity, efficient in the way it operates, and attractive in the way it appears. And the thing I'd emphasize here is that we're really talking about components that both help the functioning of the street system and its appearance. Too often, engineers just care about the functioning, and landscape architects only care about the appearance. Got to be both. 3 areas that I'll talk about that we think you can do things in are traffic management and improvements, parking management and facilities, and the pedestrian environment. You notice the use of the word management here. That's not accidental, because Nashville is in a part of its evolution and growth where, like a lot of other American cities, you're not going to be able to build new roads. In 99% of the cases, you're not going to be able to add to the road width. So you have to manage the road bed you have as best as you can, squeeze more capacity out of it, make it function better, so that the criticisms of traffic congestion can be reduced. If we could go to the next slide, traffic management. So I'm going to go to these three components and just talk about them briefly. These are all things that can be done. The intersection improvements in our own tour was noted how a lot of the intersections sometimes are offset. There can be improvements there. It can include turn lanes. It can include turnouts or drop-off pockets, particularly where you have the bus system working. A lot of cities, even though we understand you have automated traffic signal system in place, a lot of cities have increasingly sophisticated technology being used to make sure that this signalization is as efficient as possible in terms of moving traffic as it changes during the day. And then the last bullet here about public transit and bikeways. Believe me, we understand that's not going to work on every street, and that's just not going to be reality. But where you can have it and where you should have it, that has to be incorporated. The next point is really parking management and facilities, which doesn't sound like the sexiest thing, but it's the thing we kept hearing repeatedly as one of the problems and one of the costs of infill development. And let me talk about it both as on-street parking and off-street parking. On the on-street parking, it seemed to us that the city is probably leaving money on the table, in the sense that the parking meter system may not be at the same level of sophistication that other cities are using. You can see here, the current way a lot of metered parking is being operated, but having variable rates, working with the merchants to be able to, and the business improvement districts where they exist, to have variable rates, and you can actually, the city can get a lot more revenue out of its on-street parking. And there's actually a book, by the way, has an interesting title, The High Cost of Free Parking, which talks about on-street parking, something you might want to look at. The other area is off-street parking, where I'd like to emphasize that obviously in downtown and the most dense and high land cost areas, you'll be increasingly talking about structured parking. But we understand at the high cost of structured parking, you're going to have to emphasize shared parking. Every time you build a $25,000 or $30,000 structured parking space, if it's only used for certain hours of the day, it's an asset that's sitting, idle. So already we understand the Business Improvement District has a shared parking system and some shuttles. Obviously, that sort of thing should be explored more. And then this photo shows a smaller scale surface parking lot. We were shown a number of small business areas, retail areas, where the big complaint in the neighborhood and I guess among the merchants is no parking. Well, these are places where the city could build small surface parking lots that would help all of the merchants and the neighborhood. And in each case, in terms of management and revenue, we're talking about investments that can be paid back, in effect, by the increased revenue, not only from, in some cases, parking, but also from developers who may purchase the rights to a certain number of spaces, either in the structure or surface. The last one I want to jump to, and also I just wanted to say we understand that in terms of revenue, the city kind of took all its parking revenue and just put it into the general fund. Most cities do keep a revenue fund so that they keep that revenue keeps solving the problem that people want, rather than kind of being washed into the whole general fund. Pedestrian environment. The third point, I think everyone here has spoken a little bit about it. I would just emphasize two things that weren't said by other people. As much as we admire the form-based code, we also hope that it has the flexibility so that people, developers, in doing infill can have a landscape setback. Sometimes planners or zoning people get a little too fetish-like about street walls, and sometimes the infill development does better when it can have an additional 5 or 10 foot landscape setback. But the other point I'll make on this list is the undergrounding of utilities. Again, we would see very attractive infill development, and then the same old above-ground poles that the rest of the city has. And the point there, and I know how sensitive ratepayers are, but some states have all the municipal and public utilities have a tiny little addition to the rate that goes into a trust fund for undergrounding utilities over a long period of time. But even much more simply, your municipal utility ought to cooperate with the city and with the development community in undergrounding in discrete areas. And last slide, or yes, implementation. That's, of course, the most important. There's lots of plans, but until people see results, they don't believe in them. And so we're urging you to focus on discrete areas in terms of this functioning and appearance of the public realm. Focus on discrete areas or segments where the infill development's already occurring and can occur and where you want it to occur. Why in those places? Because that's where you can justify that the investment in the public realm is reaping a benefit, or reaping an investment from the private sector. And I think that justifies, that both the public and private sector are investing. And the way, and by the way, I think you're already doing this. Several people mentioned some sort of improvement plan for Green Hills. I think it was $10 million. We don't know anything about the plan, but $10 million didn't sound like that was out of control. And but I don't think anyone explained whether that's underway or will be. Anyway, there are two roles. Talk about roles of government, property owners and developers. In terms of government leadership in this issue does have to come from the mayor. We've heard what a great leadership provider the mayor's been on many topics. This is something that he can get his administration to get behind and have focused program of improvements. And organizationally, we're not the experts on how you should organize your government, but the one thing we would say is the street system, the traffic, and the parking and the whole street environment can't be buried in the bureaucracy. You're in trouble if someone wants to do something and they say, well, I think we have to get the assistant director of the bureau of something to work with the other deputy director of another. Somehow you've got to either by possibly its own department or possibly a task force where the most capable people in the various departments are pulled together. But you need to really bring it up. In terms of financing, we talked about the use of TIF, but frankly, we understand you have bonding capacity. And whether you actually use TIF for some of this or whether you just say, look, we put out general obligation bonds, we made these improvements, but over the next 5 and 10 years, we made it all back by increased taxes. Either way, you're making an investment, both the public and private sector. And I think we've already talked about how bids have done maintenance in a number of places. And the development standards are ones that the development community should live up to. And I'll leave you with actually a quote from the survey. Someone in this room anonymously already provided much of what we think. The city needs to be more proactive about investing in public infrastructure projects in these very areas. So thank you.
So a quick wrap up, and then we are going to take questions. We will be available for that. I know many of you are sitting out there saying, gee, we're already doing that, or we're already doing this. And we get it, you are, that's okay, we understand that. Keep doing those things. If there's some that struck a chord that you think you haven't done quite as much of, start doing those. These recommendations are all intended to help make those areas that you all know ought to be redeveloped, infilled, and continued development to be more attractive. It's very hard around the edges to change costs and values, but you can make things more attractive. So, quick run through. Mass transit. We know it's a bad choice of words, the third rail, but mass transit over time is going to be key to Nashville, greater Nashville, being able to keep up its growth. So get going on it now. The old saw that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. You didn't do it 20 years ago. Get going on it today in a big way, not just a little way. Education, we didn't touch on that too much, and it's really not our area of expertise, but the fact is that good elementary and secondary education is critical to any regional area, any city area, in order to have positive growth and to keep people attracted. So that's just a reminder of something that everybody knows. Corridor differentiation, this is what Mary was talking about. Excuse me. We're in favor of density, but it isn't either low density or high density. There's a range of densities that ought to be at certain places at certain times. And if you can put the right density now, but still have enough flexibility to increase density over time, that's where people have really been successful. Excuse me, it's not just going from low density to high density, it's having it in the right levels. Again, Con just touched on the financing side. Again, just using sort of very black and white examples, rather than TIF financing for specific projects to take on what are really public realm infrastructure improvements, we think it would be better to see Metro Nashville, whether it's TIF or whether it's GO bonds, do larger area infrastructure work that effectively will then create the incremental tax revenue over time. Dollars can be fungible. It's just a matter of how you keep track of it. But it's more efficient, more effective if you do it in a broader way rather than a purely targeted way. While Metro Nashville government has been doing an excellent job of supporting development, the one thing we think that you might think about is a single point of coordination from the level of the mayor's office. Whether that's an existing agency or person, or whether that's somebody new, that's not our job to try and come up with it. But somebody who can be that single point of coordination to help at the nexus of planning, implementation, finance, and the like, and understand what's going on, particularly where you've got this broad geographic area. Now, given that change is not the natural order of culture in Nashville, we're also going to suggest that there needs to be some communication and marketing. I think the person is in the room, but I won't name that person that made the comment of in Nashville when when the car behind you asks, "Why didn't you put your turn signal on?" The answer is because you don't need to know where I'm going. So we get that there's a laissez-faire sort of attitude about this. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. But we do think, therefore, that you've been doing all these good things. You've got some marvelous examples of redevelopment and infill. And what we need to be doing is communicating with the Metro Council, with the community, with the populace. Communicating, understanding what they're thinking, explaining why changes are necessary, what the benefits will be, and showing examples of how it does work. Sell the positives. I was talking to somebody before we were having coffee, a concern that sometimes you see projects that get done that maybe the design isn't what everybody would think would be great, and therefore people go, "Oh, see, that's what you get when you do this kind of zoning or this kind of planning." Well, the answer is that can happen. First of all, a little bully pulpit and jawboning if you're seeing some crappy architecture. Get some of the good architects to talk about it. But really sell the positives. But sell it, because the fact is, and you know this as well as I, most people are buried in their lives, and it isn't until the public hearing comes up that they start paying attention. You need to have sold the fact that there is a plan, there are reasons, there are going to be benefits. And then finally, there are some additional specifics that you can put in the toolkit, and I won't You'll see the list of them. I won't go through all of that. Most of them we talked about, which are just ways to, again, improve things at the margin. So overall, we think you're doing a darn good job. You're doing most of the things that you ought to be doing. Keep doing them. Keep being positive. Don't get complacent. That's really the biggest thing. And take advantage of the market, but don't get too far out in front of the curve, because once you start your own little local boom and busts, they are so difficult to get out of. So with that, I would open the floor to questions, and in another 5 or 10 minutes, 2 of our panelists are going to have to run to your superb airport that's only 15 minutes away and easy to get to, and that's all. We have a helicopter waiting for them. So I would like to open it to questions. I see Andre's hand up in the back.
Yeah.
We keep talking about it in lots of different realms. Some tools or things to keep the market affordable and workforce housing incentives, or any recommendation you have about not overpricing everything.
If I heard you correctly, the question is about workforce housing generally, but how to do that. Any of our panelists want to jump in on that?
Well, we actually had a little bit of a debate among ourselves. I'm one of these people who, even though I spent more than 30 years in government, I believe that part of the answer is by just building more supply, and supply at all price points. It's certainly true that a lot of cities have specific programs that support affordable, really workforce housing. And some of them through trust funds, and some of them through requirements for new development. But I don't think anyone's found a smoking bullet on that.
There's no way. We've done a lot of work with the Terwilliger Center at ULI nationally on workforce housing, and out of looking at hundreds of projects, there's virtually hardly a one that doesn't have some sort of direct subsidy to make the prices come to where it needs. Now, some of those subsidies could be in free land, and we've heard that some of the infill sites here that you have might possibly be such things as free land. So if you might work it, but we have great examples of workforce housing and how you can implement that in a larger scale way. Very tough. I've looked at a lot of these projects. They take a lot of work, and they're usually relatively small scale. So it's a hard slog to do it.
Other questions? Yes?
I just want to clarify that there is a regional vision for transit expansion, and as well as in Davidson County for existing transit service. We've done $1 million study between Nashville and Gallatin. We're doing one between Nashville and Rivers Grove, another one between Nashville and Clarksville, Tennessee Smith's largest city. And there's been a lot of work that's gone into that. So we do have a plan. We do have specific projects aligned with that plan. There's a conversation that's ongoing about how to resource that plan for implementation. But I just want to clarify that there's definitely a transit plan that's out there.
Okay. I guess I'm glad to hear that. My only comment would be, we come in for 3 days and nobody told us about it. That says about marketing. That's the key. That talks about the marketing. Questions? Yep, sir.
Can you talk about the implementation of improving the public realm? What are some of the best practices you've seen in as far as the governmental organization in other cities that are doing a great job at it?
Well, actually, I think ULI, working through the district council, could help in terms of showing different examples. But the one thing I would say is that the phrase I already used, it can't be, it has to be raised or elevated in its importance and focus. If it's that important a problem to you, it's got to be raised. And I think really there's kind of two different structural ways. It's either you pull the capable people who get it together into a new department or a new office, or you have the mayor have a task force where maybe people still reside in their existing organizations, but there really are given a task force model where we want to get this done. Here's 10 discrete areas or 5 or whatever, because we know you don't have no government has the capacity to do it all, so you have to start with discrete areas. But I think there are definitely different ways to do it, but it requires the leadership of the city saying this is important, and we're not just going to leave it to be one of 12 competing priorities that hardworking offices are already dealing with.
We're here. You paid for it. It's not costing any more to have us stay for another 10 minutes. Well, wait a minute. Rose is raising her hand. Are you raising your hand for me, Rose? Are you? No. Okay.
Asking her to have to stop construction.
We did have an interesting day yesterday. They had the jackhammer going most of the day. So that's why we don't have any really good ideas. We were ourselves. Hunter.
Tom mentioned a rate increase relative to dedicated funding for underground utilities, and I would love to hear maybe some locations, examples, places that we could look at to see how that's been a real challenge.
Well, I'll get you the California law, but the thing I'd emphasize is if you're paying already, let's say, $60 a month for your electricity, the fact that you now have to pay $60.05, and the 5 cents goes into a trust fund that builds up over years to underground utilities, it's just, believe me, I know the politics of ratepayers, but I'm just saying there are ways to do it that are consistent and build over time. And again, you're not going to, you're not expecting them to do 14 miles of undergrounding. You're asking them to work where the private developer is already willing to do the undergrounding right in their front door. You're asking them to, to do it in a 4-block area, 5-block area, something that makes sense, a node.
I know that we understand that Tennessee and Nashville are low tax areas, and that's always a concern. But again, this is sort of like the low density versus high density. It isn't low tax versus high tax. There are stages in between, and I think if you looked at some of these ideas, you're talking about relatively small changes in the individual costs that can lead to enough money to make things happen, which then invariably produce more revenue on a net basis ultimately anyway. You got to spend money to make it happen. There was a hand started up. Yes?
The question about parking, you had mentioned the benefits of having more paid on-street parking, but a concern that I often hear is, well, if I have to pay to park here, I'll just drive to the next county where they've got a big mall with lots of surface parking and spend my money there. Do you have any answers to how we could overcome that?
Well, I think, we're not talking about, I don't think.
No, I mean, remember, we're talking, instead of a quarter for 2 hours, a quarter for 1 hour. This is, believe me, everyone in the country is sensitive to those things, and the merchants are the most sensitive. But it's crazy to have like a free parking space in front of the store where the employee takes it up all day, when what you want is every hour it rotating, and you get 6 different customers. So those are the things we're talking. We're not talking about scaring people away. And
I don't think we're talking about a mall,
right,
which is generally free parking and owned by the mall owners. We're really talking about streets. That, we're saying, look,
in the downtown.
Nashville has an asset. All cities have an asset in the street. The city owns the street. It should get some revenue. And if you look around the country, it's been an absolute revolution in the last, I would say, 5 years. With these new meters, they're variable meters. They use computers to judge what the price should be in 1 hour.
What's really unfair, by the way, is they now have ones where once you buy an hour and you only spend 40 minutes, they know when your car leaves, and instead of leaving 20 minutes for the next person for free, it takes it back to 0.
Sorry.
The top 3 things you mentioned were mass transit, education, and streetscape. And as an architect, I'm wondering if you have any tips for things that architects and developers can do, because we're just private sector, single project at a time, to help influence or force or encourage some of those bigger municipal projects that you mentioned?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, those were not necessarily in order of priority, although frankly the mass transit, I think, is from a big picture standpoint. Some of it, again, is pointing out the success stories, the winners, particularly from the architectural standpoint, is pointing out, selling, marketing, communicating what works, why this is better than that, why it makes more sense for the users, for the neighborhoods. That's part of it.
There are some very good examples. I urge you to take a look at what's going on in Denver with their light rail system. I'm not urging you to have a light rail system. I think BRT makes unbelievably good sense, especially in a lower density area. But the Denver light rail system has now encouraged development around these nodes where the stations are, which are amazing. New housing, new office, retail are occurring in these locations. And more people in Denver are using this light rail system. There's 2 or 3 others, 4 or 5 other cities where the same thing is occurring. Actually, Los Angeles, which has a terrible reputation about being a car-oriented city, has this amazing rapid transit system now, which is quite mixed too. It's right underground and it's on surface. A lot of buses, and it's taking off. People, people are tired of sitting on the 5 or the 10 for hours and hours. It'll happen here. It's very low. In a way, you're sort of a low-density city, the size of New York, the size of LA, with 800,000 or 900,000 people. It's not that, dense. But as it gets more dense and more population, those roads are going to get very congested, and you're going to have a problem.
By the way, just everything is relative, and we've talked about, well, people will get sick of this commute, and they'll go down to Williamson County, and instead of commuting for 12 minutes, they'll commute for 32 minutes. And it's like, folks, I sit in my car for the first half mile in 32 minutes in Boston. It's all relative. I understand that, but you got to get at it now. You got to start thinking about how to solve for it now, because if you wait until it gets to be impossible, then people are going to say, "Well, we're not going to go to Nashville because it's crazy down there." Sorry.
There's a growing perception by the AIA and others of the link between public health, both physical, emotional, social public health and the built environment.
Yes.
Are there ways, have you seen examples, are there good ways to be able to leverage that growing appreciation of public health to be able to get more strength and momentum behind the things that you're talking about here?
There's a ULI right now is the next 2 years is focused on this exact issue. The things we're talking about are really elements of a healthy community. Creating these pedestrian environments, creating the greenscapes, integrating the mixed uses, uses in terms of commercial through residential, having a mix of product types on the residential side, to have a mix of demographics. All that is part of healthy community. The education component is a huge part of the healthy community, as well as the food, having the right food sources. So I think that if with a master planning approach, if you have that kind of checklist with you, you can make it happen. I've worked, there's a gentleman named Randall Lewis, who's one of our fellow governors, developer, great guy, I've known him forever. And he has worked with, within the San Bernardino Riverside County to create fellowships with university students, and the universities are matching it, and they're working with like Ontario or within the municipalities, and they're doing internships with the cities or with whatever the little government agency is, the county, to forward their particular task of what they're trying to do. And I've seen high school students go out and create food markets. I've seen high school students from this program enlist people in public health education. I mean, it's a really interesting pass it on movement that's going on right now within the healthy communities program. So we can provide you examples of that if you like that have been.
I mean, that's an area where, and I think I didn't go through all the words, but they were up on the printed section of getting the meds and the eds more involved.
Yes.
I mean, you've got great stuff here in terms of your hospitals, your healthcare industry, the colleges, Belmont, Vanderbilt, and the like, and they ought to be more involved in this whole process anyway. But certainly that's an area where they can bring specific expertise to an area that is tangentially real estate related. So it's all of that, combined and getting everybody on board. Do you have to run, Mary?
No, I'm Pat, so he's been meeting.
Okay.
He's just getting his keys.
I'm gonna get
Thank you for asking.
Get our folks out before. Normally, of course, 15 years ago, back when the market, 20 years ago when the market was good, this wouldn't be a problem because I'd have my G5 waiting for me out there. But
Your dreams.
well, it was. I do have to tell a little ULI story. I was at one governor's meeting in a very, very nice place to be. And one of the topics was the whole global warming and emissions and carbon footprint and the like. And half the people there were going to fly back on their own jets. So it was a little embarrassing at times. You can get crazy. So no, I'm going to be. I'll line up with Southwest and see whether I can get a seat or not. Go from there. Any other questions? I'm not going anywhere. Con and I have some time. Mary may have to leave, but we're happy to respond to anything you have in mind. We're also happy this will take a while. Our folks will be taking our mishmash of notes and outlines and comments back to Washington. It'll get edited, and eventually you'll end up with a printed report that'll have all the good stuff on it. In the meantime, Rose and Hunter, but Rose, well, of course, Rose is going to do the work, but has our contact information, and we are happy if you have any questions, comments, whatever, contact us directly, and I know we can respond.
Will the question and answer content be included in the report as well?
I'm sorry?
The question and answer content, will that be included in the report?
If we picked it up.
And the
Yeah.
recording.
Okay. Sure. So, thank you.
We'll let you go in here in just a second. I just wanted to say thank you to Con, Mary, Dick, thank you very much. Telrick, the same thing. Gail and Jess, thank you all for being here and helping out. We look forward to getting the report back. Did want to make two announcements. One, be sure, Rose, the date for Emerging Trends, which is our December 11th. Be sure you put that on your calendar. As you know, we sell that out normally, and it's a great annual program that we do every year. And then secondly and finally, be sure you look back at your email that you probably received a day or two ago about our sponsorship campaign. We've already had some great response. We have some high goals set in terms of increasing our revenue to continue to allow Rose to do what she does so well and expand what she does and continue to increase the programming, education opportunities and networking opportunities of the district council. So be sure you respond to that. Steve Kalinsky, Rose, myself, any of us can answer any questions about it. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon.